And so for anyone who has that donut in their head, I very much recommend you talk about it with somebody else. Even if it's just a like, hey, I was thinking of doing this. It could go in a couple of different directions. If this is high in the sky for you, you could have that sort of dose of reality of somebody that you trust telling you, like, yeah, are you sure you want to do this right now? And bring you a bit of context, maybe make you see the forest for the trees and realize you can make something out of the arrangement you have. Or you could have somebody make you realize that this thing is much more attainable than you may think.
Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Forziat of Take the Doughnut, here to help you get inspiration and get donuts. I'm a motivational keynote speaker, and today I'm bringing you a Take the Doughnut interview with Mike Bloom, who is a writer for Parade Magazine and a podcaster for RHAP Has a Podcast. Somebody that I was just saying to Mike, I've heard many, many hours of his coverage, and I'm so excited to talk with him. Welcome, Mike.
I'm so surprised that you've listened to hours and hours of me and you still want to talk with me. You're probably like, what do I want to hear this annoying nasally voice in my ears responding to my questions? So I'm glad that you're withstanding that, and we are here to take down some donuts. My son has become very into donuts lately, so I know my way around them quite circularly.
Well, that leads me to my very first question then. What is your favorite donut? Or what is your son's?
I mean, they're both one and the same, because I think that is kind of the thing about parenting, right? Is like, usually when you're a kid, the first taste you get of things and therefore the favorites you develop are usually your parents' favorites. They're not going to be like, let's go to the ice cream shop. I don't really like pistachio, but maybe my son will. You sort of derive it from your own experiences. But I am such a basic bitch. Like, I love a glazed donut. It is so simple, but there's beauty in simplicity. Just give me plain old circle of fried dough, throw some enigmatic sugary glaze on top of it, and I personally am totally happy. I think second most, if I'm going like a little adventurous, I go with like an apple cider donut. That's I would say that's more of a year-round thing. I know it's more popular over the course of the fall, but I do love the fall and I want it to be all year round. So, listen, I'm not incredibly adventurous in terms of my favorite types of donuts, but those are my favorite too, and by proxy, sort of my son's favorite too.
Ah, that sounds perfect. And a little taste of fall all year round sounds like a good way to
Hmm.
go. Well, I said just a little bit about you up front, but tell us more about yourself. And I'm especially interested in asking this question to you because, as I said up front, you're a podcaster. I've heard a lot of coverage from you, but it's never been about you. And so this is a great opportunity for those of us who have enjoyed hearing all the things that you've talked about to actually hear you tell us more about yourself. So what should we know about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've made a career talking about people that are way more interesting than myself, but regardless, I will take the opportunity if I can get it. So I am somebody who has been covering reality TV in some way, shape, or form for, believe it or not, 10 years. I started a decade on the microphone here back in the spring of 2014. How I basically got involved, long story short, was that I had gone to school for theater. I had tried the acting gig for a bit, got bit by the bug. The bug eventually made its way out of my system. I said maybe this isn't necessarily the platform for me, was kind of wondering what I should do next. And as someone who had been listening to podcasts but never participating in them, one of the podcasts that I listened to, called The Survivor Historians, had a quote unquote contest to find a new co host. One of theirs was vacating the post for a brief period of time. And I was like, well, I like podcasts and I like to improv, which is like sort of similar skill set as podcasting. Let me try. And the first chance I got to, it was an electric sensation. It was something that I had not felt in a long time from quote unquote performing, because it was talking about things that I loved and that I had been watching and reading and talking about, to no one in particular, online under miscellaneous guises for about 20 years, or sorry, about like 15 years at that point. And so from there, it just kind of ballooned. I was very fortunate to get kind of welcomed onto Rob Has a Podcast, of course, hosted by the absolutely sensational Rob Cesternino, at first as a guest and then becoming sort of like the mainstays covering all of these random shows, which then segued into involvement on the scripted side of things, Post Show Recaps, which was a network that covered scripted television helmed by Josh Wigler, who has become an incredible friend and basically a brother to me, including in one major facet, which is as he and I had built a relationship around like 2016, 2017, I had talked with him and said, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life, with my career. I've been working in admin at higher education at the time. And I said, I really like talking to people. I know you're a journalist. What can you tell me about how to get on that path? And, I had sort of been exploring some options about what to do, maybe to go back to school for all that. And it just so happened that at that time, Josh Bigler had previously been covering Survivor for Parade.com, and he was leaving his post to go write full time for The Hollywood Reporter, and he recommended me for the position. And so writing about Survivor then expanded into writing about Big Brother, writing about The Amazing Race, writing about Top Chef, just ever expanding as the reality TV genre has seemed to for the past 7 years. I have been granted so many incredible opportunities from that. And so through all of these, fantastic doors being opened for me by people, I have had the great pleasure of getting to cover a genre I have loved and adored since day dot in a professional capacity, both verbally and written wise.
This is amazing. And I think people who have heard some of these interviews probably have a good sense of why you're exactly the right person to talk to for this. Let me reset here for a second and just say,
Yes.
this is a Take the Doughnut interview. So what does that mean? For me, Take the Doughnut is an expression that is basically the same thing as carpe diem. It's all about going after what you want in life, taking those
Or like
opportunities.
Carbe Diem.
Aha, there you go. And it all comes from this weird thing that happened to me in college. I left an actual donut on the table, but it became an object lesson for me and what it looks like to leave opportunities behind. So I don't want to do that anymore. I want to take the donut. I'll link a video here for those who haven't seen that description yet, that story. But basically, this conversation with you, Mike, is all about, practically speaking, what does it look like when we go after the things that we want in life? And the journey you've had is basically that. Like, this is what happens when you just keep saying yes to things. So I guess this is a redundant question, but I'll start here. How are you with going after goals? What is that process like for you?
It's a great question because I am somebody who is, surprise me. I'm hopefully I don't surprise anybody with this. Incredibly anxious, and I unfortunately have a mindset where I tend to jump to the worst case scenario immediately. It's this idea of like, well, what if I break my neck diving into the pool, and so I won't hop on the diving board even. You sort of jump to the last possible step in the worst possible case before you even try anything. And I'm very fortunate in that due to the support system I have, and again, to your point, through experiences, I have really tried to couch myself in thinking like that is not a place you should jump to each and every time because you don't know until you try. And it's trite and it's rote, but it's correct. And that, yes, you could try things and it might turn out poorly for you. But look, the world is full of those people. I think we all put, or at least I do, these insurmountable pressures on ourselves to be correct 100% of the time, to always act this way, to always do X, Y, and Z, because everyone else in their life is doing it correctly, when that is not the case whatsoever. People have been fired from their jobs before. People have quit their jobs to go to other ventures, and then it winds up not being successful. And look, at the end of the day, they're still living, they're still breathing, they're still being themselves. And most of the time, they end up probably being even happier because they learn from those experiences. And so, for me, a good amount of effort whenever I try to attain a goal just starts with like honestly giving myself that initiative. My brain is quite fantastical. If you've listened to anything that I cover, you know that. And so, like, I will certainly have ideas in my head that seem absolutely fictional to accomplish. And what I've been trying to attune my brain to as of late is to think like, well, why can't it be? Especially with the world we live in and how much media has changed and grown and morphed over the past 10 years. Why can't you go for this thing? Now, look, I will also attempt to check in with my loved ones, particularly my wife, before I do end up making any sort of big leaps in my life. But that being said, when I do try to have a goal in mind, I'm much more now conditioned to, yes, have this end result, but then really sit with it and not make it a fleeting thought, not immediately write it off, to actually invite it over for lunch and talk it through and say, all right, are there actual attainable steps we can get to make this thing work?
What's really interesting, when you started off that answer, you dropped a word that has not come up very much in the interviews, and I flat out don't know why now that you've said it, and that word is anxious.
Oh, really?
I would
I'm the only
imagine,
anxious person you've ever interviewed in this series.
and I don't think that's the case, right? Like, I think it's probably a really common feeling when something is presented to you and you're not sure we don't know that we can do a thing until we do it. So I love that you dropped that word here, because I actually think it's extremely relatable and not often uttered. If this podcast is any indication of that. So, thank you for sharing that. And when you get going, once you commit to doing something and you're in progress, especially if that thing is going to take a lot of doing, it's,
Yeah.
going to be a big donut that you have to take a bite out of, and it's going to take a lot of steps along the way. What keeps you motivated in that process?
I mean, I think for me, again, I'm very lucky in that the stuff I get to cover is the stuff that I'm really interested in. So again, it's a little trite to just say, "Oh, it's the passion that keeps me humming along," but like that's really what it comes down to for me. Is this matter of if complications arise or if it's like, yeah, I have to put in a little bit of grunt work to get the outcome that I want to. It's all about focusing on that outcome that I want to get at the end of the day. That the reason why I put myself through this in the first place. And look, if it becomes a matter of that outcome is something that I don't want, I realize then about face, then I abort, then I move on to something else. This is what happened to me when I was pursuing acting. Was I had thought for a while, like, okay, this is something I want to pursue professionally. I want to make a living out of this. I want to be a full-time actor. That is my end goal. But I kind of had to stop myself and I thought, yeah, is this something you necessarily want to is this the work you want to put in to get to this end goal? Because I was working, in a waiter gig that was definitely wearing on me. I was going out on auditions for commercials that I didn't necessarily care about. And it sort of made me realize, okay, can I do what I want to do while also at the same time have the ability to explore other avenues that, to be honest, I really haven't before in a relatively streamlined education that I was pursuing. That's the other thing as well that I think also keeps me going in these moments of, I wouldn't say strife, but certainly questioning, going back to the anxiety, is the idea of like, can I think about this differently? If I want to pursue this goal and I feel stuck or I feel like I'm on a step that I cannot necessarily push through, is there another way I could push it from? Is there another thing that I can go after where maybe even the goal needs to be modified? Maybe it's not, hey, I want to cover this show because, the juice isn't worth the squeeze or there aren't avenues to get there. But could I try to cover something else in that area? Or could I try to cover this for a different publication? As an example, there are ways to succeed in your goal without going for it explicitly, in my opinion, just because, again, the world is big and wide and mysterious and chaotic. So I think that idea of A, how sweet that treat is when you get to it, but B, the fact that it could be a different treat once you get to it definitely helps me get through some of those more trepidatious moments.
Our brains are wired in a really similar way.
Mm,
This is really
I love
relatable for
this.
me. Yeah. Let's unpack the idea of challenges a little bit more, because you're bringing that up along the way. So, is there a particular brand of challenge that just seems to keep coming up for you over and over again, no matter what you're going after? Like, do you have an Achilles heel?
Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, the fact that there are 24 hours in a day. I have had so many people, talk to me over the past 10 years asking or saying, I should say more so, I don't know how you do it all. And I reply, I don't either. Now, look, maybe it's come a bit at the expense of my social life. So maybe that sort of is like something that you deduct, but I'll be candid. It has become a lot more of a balancing act for me, as I've been given the honor of getting to do more things, cover more things. I've been excited to do so. That also comes with the additional cost of, okay, you are investing and divesting more time and more effort into these things. And it has become even tougher with the fact that I have a family and I'd like to spend time with them. If I could, I'd like to get more apple cider donuts for my son if I'd like. And so I have had myself, definitely doing more prioritization, I'd say, in the past 5 years than I certainly did in the first five of my career, where it certainly was, to your point, again, I come from the world of improv and this world of like, accept an opportunity, you never know where it may lead. They say when one door closes, a window opens. Let's open all the windows and doors. Like, I just painted the room and let the breeze waft in and see where it takes you. But I've had to be a bit more realistic since my son has been born and try to figure out, okay, are there certain hours of the day when I can do things? Because I know I need time for my son. Do I need to commit myself to these certain things and not to these other things? I found myself having to certainly pull away from opportunities and podcasts that I would previously. And it's not due to a lack of love and passion for them. It's just a matter of reprioritizing. And again, speaking to that anxiety, my initial jump would just be like, oh, this is terrible. Why am I doing this? I want to do this for the rest of my life. And now I'm depriving myself of these opportunities. But I think, again, it also allows me to not, I'm not going to use the term burden, but I think certainly overwhelm my mental capacity with doing too much. Because even if you love what you do, you can still absolutely overwork yourself and get to a point of burnout where the work isn't fun anymore. And I think due to kind of forcing myself to pull myself away from this microphone and this computer for a lot of the day and invest my time in an actual living, breathing human being, it really serves as a nice, healthy break for me to sort of focus on what I'm doing, why I'm doing all this in the first place, before I then pull myself back into my work and jump in with both feet.
Absolutely. What would you say is the biggest donut you've ever taken? If you think personally or professionally, whatever comes to mind for you.
Yeah, so it definitely has to be writing. Because before joining Parade, I had never done anything journalistic in my life. I had talked with people, but even from a podcast perspective, like, I wasn't interviewing people on these podcasts. I would just talk with people and have a good time. I wasn't necessarily someone that had built a career in let's sit down and let's talk things through. And so even the idea of reaching out to somebody and being like, I want to be a journalist, that was a big enough step for me, because then I thought, okay, I'll go to school, I'll learn the basics of interviewing, maybe I'll get my feet wet with some publications, and then I can really segue into what someone like Josh was doing. I got thrown into the goddamn pool. And as someone who doesn't know how to swim, that was a little scary, but I am so proud of myself. It's a skill set that honestly, like, I never thought I ever had. I was just walking into these initial interviews thinking, I'm just gonna chit chat with them and ask them the questions that I want to know and hope that the fandom wanted to know these answers as well. And look, I've certainly gained skills as the time has gone along, both from all the experiences I've been given as well as the fantastic people that I've talked with and talked about these things. But it's something that I was terrified about the very first time I did it. And I was so lucky, because the first chance I got to do an interview was with a friend. It was with Zeke Smith, who had gone through a lot in his Survivor season, his second time. We won't go into necessarily that, but I was so happy that obviously there was a lot of nerves behind it. This was my first time majorly working with a big network like CBS that I had been admiring for so long, and I was just a nobody at that time. And so it really is just sort of like riding a bike for the first time, where like you start to pedal and it's really wobbly at first and you don't know if you're going to fall over. And the only thing you can do is just keep pedaling and just keep gaining that balance and that sense of not only rightness in terms of physics, but from a mental state as well. It's by far the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life. And I'm so fortunate that I got this opportunity, but like at the same time, I am so proud of myself because it was unlocking a skill set I never thought I had within me. And to be honest, it feels like, I was unlocking a door to the thing that I was born to do.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And not for nothing, not knowing what year your interview with Zeke Smith was, but if that was your first one, potentially that was sort of massive. So
Yeah.
even if it's
Yeah.
with a friend, that's a no joke first get.
Yeah. And that was,
and a
and that was
big
something as well.
responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, that was something as well is that I think validly so, a lot of our discussion around reality TV as a genre has, I think, really evolved from a certain capacity to talk about things like identity politics and talk about issues that are being brought to the forefront. And it's tough covering a show like Big Brother, where, from my perspective, I am one of the first voices that some of these contestants that are leaving will listen to. And there are certainly people on shows like that who have done some not so savory things, and some that have boarded on explicitly showing biases. And it can be stressful sometimes to that point, like, again, trying to satiate what the fans want, that they want to be expressed to these people who may have done very hurtful things, while also at the same time trying to treat them as a person, trying to not approach them from that gotcha journalism angle or come at them so hard that they feel like it's just an absolute pile-on. And so it's always been tough to sort of master that balance as well. But again, at the same time, I do think I pride myself on being a people person, in one of my superpowers being able to make people feel comfortable in these types of conversations where they can open up about these things and not necessarily think about anyone who's going to read it or listen to it. That right now, right here, we are just two people having a conversation, and you can tell me as much as you want to, and I will receive it, and I will digest it, and I will give stuff back to you as well. That's what we should concentrate on first and foremost.
Hmm. This might be a tricky question for you to answer given what you do, but is there a donut that's currently in progress for you? Is there something that you're taking right now that you can talk about?
Oh, I mean, so the other, biggest challenge that comes with this stuff is definitely financials, right? Is this idea that, again, it's been so nice that podcasts in general have ballooned in the past 10 years, luckily, and of course with, my own career. But of course, we always worship the almighty dollar. And so, it's been much more of trying to piece things together here and there to try to get a living, to support my family in a certain regard, or at least not feel as incredibly anxious about making sure that ends meet. And so that's always a big donut for me. And listen, just from my own personality perspective, it's very tough for me to feel comfortable in general, but just trying to find stability in a way. I think I've been very lucky in the stuff that I've gotten to cover has been so long running, but there's always that thing in the back of your head, right? That's like, if this thing goes away, what happens next? And so that's been the biggest thing for me. I mean, the other thing that I'd love to do, and I've already done this in a different capacity, is like getting to do anything official for a show. I was so fortunate in that I got to moderate a Paley Center panel for the 35th season of The Amazing Race, and that was certainly like a check-in moment for me of like, look how far you freaking got to do this. Like, you deserve this. Let your talent shine, but don't let it shine too much, because let the other talent shine. That's your goal. But like, use this as a reminder of the skills you possess and the light you're able to hopefully bring to this world. And I'm hopeful to shine it more in a larger capacity moving forward, whatever that might be. I've had such a great working relationship with all these networks. I've had such a great time getting to work with all this talent, and that's something I would love to do more of moving forward.
Mm. There may be some people who are listening to this who have a donut of their own they want to take. Maybe they've started, or maybe it's just an idea that's still in their heads. But let's sprinkle some encouragement. And what would you say to those people who have a thought about what they want to do and they're not sure how to move forward?
So I am somebody, to my detriment, that is all about external validation. Again, I would not recommend people who put themselves professionally on the internet do this, because it has led to many, many sessions of therapy and many, many doses of medication. But that's just me. I am somebody who will have this thought in my head, and I need to check in with somebody else about it. Whether it's my own sort of paranoid thinking, or it might just be, hey, I want to do this. What do you think about this idea? Hey, I was thinking about a podcast about this. Does this work? And so for anyone who has that donut in their head, I very much recommend you talk about it with somebody else. Even if it's just a like, hey, I was thinking of doing this. It could go in a couple of different directions. If this is high in the sky for you, you could have that sort of dose of reality of somebody that you trust telling you, like, yeah, are you sure you want to do this right now? And bring you a bit of context, maybe make you see the forest for the trees and realize you can make something out of the arrangement you have. Or you could have somebody make you realize that this thing is much more attainable than you may think. I am certainly someone that will come up with an idea, and then the second thought that comes to my head is, yeah, but would people like this? Could this be something that actually has legs? To hear someone who validates that and says, yeah, I think you could definitely do this, honestly, it makes my heart soar maybe more than anything in the world. And so that's what I would personally recommend. I mean, definitely from experience. Again, it's me talking to Rob Sisson, asking if I could do more podcasting that got me involved in RHAP and led to where I am now. It's me reaching out to Josh being like, hey, I was thinking about doing journalism. What do you think? That allowed me to get into Parade. It's me talking with Parade being like, hey, I want to cover this type of show. What do you think? That allowed me to pursue these other opportunities. The worst thing they could say is no. And I think we as people, me especially, like to put the cart before the horse and sometimes jump to, well, if they say no, then the world ends and it's over and I'm embarrassed, etc. But the most of the time, these people that you're talking to wouldn't necessarily realize that you're thinking of these types of things until you vocalize it. So whether it is a project at work that you had an idea about that's a little out of the box, or if it's like a possible career change and you want to start pursuing something that you're really passionate about, if you have someone that you can check in about that to give you sort of a temperature check on the outside, that is absolutely essential, in my opinion, to the process.
It's really well said. If people want to follow what you're up to, if they want to know, see all the great things that you're working on, where can they find you? What links should I put into the description?
Yeah, so the main one is my chief coverage is over at parade.com. So you can check that out. If you go to like parade.com/member/Mike Bloom, that's where you get the list of like all my articles. But I'm bound to pop up there every couple of days with something where I'm covering Survivor, Big Brother, The Amazing Race, Top Chef, The Circle, The Challenge, basically a bunch of reality TV stuff under the sun. And then from a podcast perspective, I'm chiefly seen on Rob Has a Podcast, which you can find in any podcatcher of choice. Right now, on a weekly basis, I am talking Survivor and Big Brother on some very fun podcasts with some very fun people. And then as, shows come and go throughout the year, I tend to ebb and flow on different types of shows. I do a lot of stuff in the Survivor off season as well, covering other random reality TV shows that might show up from a podcasting perspective as well. Might be doing some scripted coverage as well. We kind of sunset post-show recap due to some business decisions, but that might be seeing a second life on Rob Has a Podcast. In general, you can check me out on social media at a Mike Bloom type, where I also have a cameo. If you've listened to me prattle on for half an hour and for some reason you're like, I want to hear more from this guy, possibly wearing a stupid costume, you can find me on Cameo. I'm relatively cheap and I can say literally in anything and everything for money. I'm a whore in that regard. So please be my pimp, people. Be my pimp.
Awesome. I mean, there you have it, everybody. Make sure to check out those resources. And, if you like this video, which of course you did, I mean, look at the way that the big finish we just arrived at. Be sure to like and subscribe on this video because there's so many inspirational interviews still to come. In the meantime, thank you so much, Mike, for taking some time and talking with all of us about taking the donut and going after what you want.
Of course, this was such a great idea. I'm so happy you came up with this podcast in the first place because, yeah, for me, I am someone who has been granted so many opportunities that I want to pay it forward to people as well, whether it be people who approach me asking, like, how can I be a podcaster or how can I get into reality TV journalism? I benefited so much from those that gave me a chance, and I try to do the same to others. And even through advice like this, I think it's such an essential idea, especially nowadays where the world is so open to so many things we can do, but it sort of gives us that decision paralysis as to like, okay, but do I want to do this and how do I want to do this? Sometimes following these concrete steps is the way to get going.
It's beautifully said. Well, okay, everybody, you know what to do. Go out there, get inspiration, and get donuts. Bye, everyone.